Happy New Year, folks. J. Scott Phillips here, and tonight we are bound once again for the golden age of science fiction with a look at the story and artwork of A.E. Van Vogt's 1939 short story, Discord in Scarlet, which was first published in the December 1939 issue of Astounding Stories. Now, I am shooting tonight from the living room here at the Phillips compound because I usually shoot back in the library, which is a much quieter part of the house. And but the problem is that as last year, once again, it seems like my neighbor thinks that for some reason New Year's Eve is a good night to throw a party. So it might be a little too noisy back there. Usually more quiet back there, but that room backs right up to the side of his house where he's throwing a party. It may not be that much more quiet in here. This room is closer to the neighborhood streets, and it is New Year's Eve, so there may possibly be fireworks going off and horns honking, merriment such as that. But we'll get through anyway and see how we start the new year off here together. I hope there's enough time to get this loaded before the end of New Year's here, and then so that I'll still have some time, hopefully, to go out drinking. But we'll see about that. Anyway, getting back to our story for the night here, Discord in Scarlet, as I say, by A.E. Van Vogt. And just to start off, we'll take a look at how it was announced in the issue before it first appeared, and that was the November 1939 issue of Astounding Stories, and the editor, John W. Campbell Jr., posted this announcement in the column In Times to Come. And he says, "Taking the cover next month, done by Gilmore, incidentally, is another story by A.E. Van Vogt, who scored a first-ranked position with his Black Destroyer in July. Discord in Scarlet is something of a sequel, and I think as good and unusual as was Van Vogt's first yarn." And Discord in Scarlet was, in fact, a sequel to Black Destroyer. Now, a few years ago, when I first started my channel and I decided I would start doing a series on the golden age of science fiction, Black Destroyer was my first in this series. So I kind of consider this video now to be a sequel to that video, and I'll leave a link to it down below. But along with Black Destroyer, Discord in Scarlet years later, Van Vogt would stitch them together along with some other short stories of his, of a similar nature, into a fix-up novel that he would call The Voyage of the Space Beagle. It's a pretty well-known fix-up novel now, and one that Van Vogt is particularly known for. But in putting all those stories together into a novel-length book, he wrote vast chunks of these stories and added a lot more kind of backstory of the crew and the politics involved in the chain of command, and worked in some philosophy that Van Vogt was into at the time, things like that. So I am just focusing in this video tonight on the original short story as it appeared in the December 39 issue of Astounding. I will leave a link to that other video below if you want to kind of catch up. In that video, I also give a little more background of Van Vogt himself and his story of how he came to write the story, getting into writing science fiction to begin with and getting published in Astounding. That's another story. I'll let you go and do your homework if you want to. But the Space Beagle, the name of the Beagle, the name of the ship was never mentioned in the Black Destroyer. It was just a big spherical ship that landed on this planet and dealt with a marauding creature. And this is a very similar story, but for the first time now, since it is a sequel, it's recalling characters from that first story, Black Destroyer, and even refers to how they almost didn't make it out alive from dealing with the creature in Black Destroyer. And so there are some flashbacks in that story, so it's a true sequel. But for the first time in Discord in Scarlet, we are given the name of the ship as the Beagle, which of course is a reference to the HMS Beagle, which was the ship that Charles Darwin took his historic voyage on around the world, where he collected all kinds of specimens and things around the world that ultimately helped him develop his theory of evolution. So this ship is the science fiction version of that. It's fully manned by scientists who are out to explore the galaxy, or in this particular story's case, in between galaxies. They're heading to another galaxy. And so it's their adventures dealing with the unknown, much like Star Trek. Discord in Scarlet is another creature story, structured very similarly to a Black Destroyer, which was inspired by John W. Campbell Jr.'s story, Who Goes There?, which Van Vogt read sometime before he got interested in writing science fiction himself. It was a creature story, so that inspired him to write science fiction, and so was kind of copying that. I'm really not copying it, but inspired by, there was some copying going on there, but based on Campbell's story, Who Goes There?, which later is probably better known today as the story that John Carpenter's The Thing is based on, where there's an alien creature marauding and killing scientists that are stationed in Antarctica, and that creature can change form, shapeshift to look like human beings, in particular human beings amongst those scientists. That is a kind of a type of camouflage, I guess, and then can take the bodies over and then thereby reproduce itself. So this story is very similar in that the creature in this story is hell-bent to continue his own line, to reproduce. And so this story, again, like Black Destroyer, starts off from the point of view of the creature itself. And in this case, the creature's name is Ixtal. And not just his name, but that is also apparently the name of his race, his species, Ixtal. But at the beginning of the story here, Ixtal is floating in space, drifting or plummeting through space, intergalactic space, for millions of years. And it is intimated later in the story that it may actually have been from the universe before the Big Bang. I guess the Big Bang was kind of a new concept that was coming out at the time, and just the deep time involved in this creature floating forever for millions of years in space really sets this story up, sets the creature up, Ixtal, as kind of a sympathetic character. He is just kind of in a delirious state, floating between galaxies, wondering if he may ever, the remotest chance, ever come across a planet where he can land on somehow and survive, and then start to repopulate his species. So he's been floating along for, as I say, millions of years. And then one day, he bumps into a spaceship. He just kind of floating along and bumps into a spaceship. It kind of wakes him up, and he realizes that he's collided with a ship here that has stopped in intergalactic space to effect repairs. And there's a number of crewmen outside working on the exterior hull of the ship. And he thinks, this might be my chance, but he's bounced off of the ship and he's floating away now. And he thinks, oh no, there goes my chance. He's remembering his own race and what it was like. His race had at one time populated the stars, apparently from a universe before the current one here. But they had given up space travel and wound up living back on their home planet, kind of isolating themselves again for some reason, and were just enjoying the beauty of nature, of their world and all that. So he has a philosophic and intelligent background himself, his own race. And we feel sorry for Ixtal because he has just been floating without hope for millions and millions of years. But now things are about to change here. And one of the crew spots X still floating a little ways away from the ship, so they decide to bring him in. So they send a cage out and they collect Extel. They realize that even though Extel is, he's got 4 arms and 4 legs and a body and a head, how is he alive in space? So they figured that anything with arms and legs must have evolved on a planet somewhere, because otherwise you wouldn't need legs. But he doesn't seem to have any means of propelling himself through space. He's just floating, but yet somehow he's still alive. Now, a lot of the crew are very worried because the last time they came across a strange creature was in Black Destroyer, and it almost killed them all. They don't want to repeat that. And a lot of them are thinking, we don't want to have anything to do with this. Remember last time, we don't want to bring this thing aboard. We can't ever do that again. We can't let it happen again. But they're scientists, so there are a lot of people on the ship saying, that's why we're out here. Very Star Trek-like. That's the mission of this ship, is to investigate and learn about the unknown. So we're going to bring them aboard. But they're trying to be careful. What they don't know, though, is that Extel can pass through most substances. He can walk through walls and decks, things like that. There's one substance that he can't get through, and that's neutronium. I think he's referring to the neutronium, which is the hull of the ship, which he couldn't pass through. But he can pass through anything else within the ship pretty easily, not just the metal floors, ceilings, and walls and things, but also through the crewmen, and that's going to cause problems. So Extel is he's going to try to repopulate his race, and what he's going to do is he carries eggs in his chest, and so he's going to reach into his chest, take an egg out, and implant it into different crewmen. And he comes across one particular crewman on a deck. He phases through the wall, surprises the crewman, and then reaches into his chest to plant an egg, and finds the heart. And this causes a heart attack in the wayward crewman here, and he dies. This kind of surprises Extel because he didn't realize that these human creatures were so fragile. Now he's got to be careful, because he can't afford to kill these guys. He's got to have his eggs incubate within their living bodies. That's very important. So he's got this dead crewman on his hand, so he's kind of groping around inside the body, and he finds the stomach. He goes, that's what I'm looking for. So any of these other creatures on this ship, I will use the stomach. So Extel is thinking, it might be a good idea to kind of look for the crewmen with the largest stomachs. So he decides he's going to go for the bigger guys on the ship here. Maybe he can get more eggs planted in those guys. But of course, the crew is finding out that once again, now we're dealing with this marauding creature that's out to kill us all, and we've got to stop him, because if he gets loose, if he kills all of us, the rest of the galaxy may be in danger. And because once this guy starts repopulating, there's just no stopping him. We've got to stop it here and now. Now, if this is starting to sound familiar, this led to a lawsuit between A.E. Van Vogt and Ridley Scott for his movie Alien, which, as I say, sounds familiar. These alien creatures were implanting eggs into the crew of that spaceship and incubating them, and then they would pop out and repopulate their species. That was the same plot, and so Van Vogt sued the production of Alien, and kind of a famous little slice of science fiction history there. But it's interesting to me, if you think about that, well, is that kind of a trope? And maybe at the time it wasn't, so the Van Vogt, I think they settled out of court, but they decided that, we'll just buy the rights to the story from Van Vogt, and they pay him off. We'll make it up, 1,000 times more down the line. But if Van Vogt was so concerned about, hey, don't steal my stories, isn't he stealing that very same idea? The creature has a little bit different types of abilities than John Campbell's creatures in Who Goes There, but they were trying to repopulate by taking over the scientists. So one thing leads to another down the line, I guess, but are those thefts? Are those homage? What? Why doesn't Van Vogt then have to pay off John W. Campbell's estate for the very same idea? Anyway, that's all another story. Now, speaking of another story, Black Destroyer, which was Van Vogt's first science fiction story, I talk in that other video about how awkwardly written it was. Van Vogt had taken a correspondence writing course, and I think was just sticking so close to that formula that he regarded as an authority that his storytelling techniques were just kind of disjointed in a lot of ways. And that was just one story ago. Now, Discord in Scarlet reads much more fluidly, I think. Much easier to read. Very, very similar story. But I think he's learning to tell a story better now. One of the things, though, that kind of stopped me while I was reading this was a little unbelievable bit here. I think it's a good idea, but it was in the crew trying to communicate, not really to negotiate or anything, but they're just trying to get a point across to the creature when they confront him in one of the corridors, that they want Ixtal to know that they're kind of onto him. And one of the crew, one of the scientists there at the time, has a little sketch pad or a notepad. So he quickly draws a little something on one sheet of paper and holds it up to Ixtal. And Ixtal looks at it, and then he draws very quickly on another sheet of paper another drawing and holds up to Ixtal. And Ixtal realizes something, and then he jumps through a wall and gets away. Well, what was all that about? Well, it comes back a little later on. The captain is explaining to the crew what they got across to Ixtal so that Ixtal knows they're onto him. So the captain is going to describe these two drawings to the crew. And the first drawing is a likeness of Ixtal passing through a wall. And next to the wall, this scientist has drawn a little atomic symbol that represents that metal. And he's showing 200 electrons orbiting a nucleus and a series of triangles, thinking that the scientific notation will be universally understood between any two species that are as advanced as they believe Ixtal to be. And then the second drawing is another atomic diagram of neutronium, and that's the material that Ixtal cannot pass through. So they understand this about him. And it's an unfinished drawing, but it shows only 800 electrons of 40,000, but 80 of those electrons have 16 sides each. Now, I love the idea of using scientific notation to communicate with Ixtal and let him know that we understand a weakness of yours here, and now we can get you. And that's why Ixtal looks at that for a second and goes, I got to come up with a better plan, and he takes off. But how in the world could that scientist have drawn that much detail in those two drawings within a matter of seconds to hold them up to Ixtal going, here, we know you can go through this stuff, but we know you can't go through this stuff. How in the world is that possible? And it kind of takes the speed of reading this story away for a minute. It makes you kind of stop and wonder, wait, am I reading that right? I actually had to go back and reread it to make sure and just realize that, well, Van Vogt is still making some mistakes here. He's got a great idea here, but he's kind of fumbling the execution of it. How could he have streamlined that or communicated that at least to the reader of what those sketches were supposed to be of and how quickly those possibly could have been drawn. Anyway, it's a very fun story, much better written, I think, and easier to follow than Black Destroyer was. Not that Black Destroyer was hard to follow, but it just had some disjointed sections. How did this now become that? Those kinds of things, that there were just chunks missing or that didn't seem to line up quite right. Little awkward in several areas. Discord and Scarlet, much smoother, I think. So Van Vogt is getting better. So now let's move on to the second part of the video here. We talk about the artwork. So we'll start off with the first of 4 illustrations that were created for this Astounding December 1939 issue. And the cover, the full-color cover, was by the artist Gilmore. It's our very first look at the creature Ixtal. And I think this illustration is just horrible. That's my own personal opinion. It's a fun cover, probably was nice and bright, and helped to sell the magazine when it was first on the newsstands. But the rendering of this horrific creature just looks way too cartoony to me. Now, Van Vogt described Ixtal in the story as having a smooth, round head that was bisected by a slit or a gash for a mouth. But here he's just got kind of a goofy little smile here. And he's also described as having 4 arms at the top of his cylindrical body and 4 at the bottom. And then he's got 8 wire-like digits on each hand and foot. And here, along with his little smile, Ixtal seems almost like he's waving hi to these 4 Beagle crewmen. Just too playful, I think. And then to indicate the fact that Ixtal has 4 arms, Gilmore has given us a second pair of shoulders, and it almost looks like there's another creature cozying up right behind Ixtal. Gilmore has also given us what look like little rocket jets shooting out of Ixtal's eyes, and he is described in the story as having eyes like coals of fire, and they gleam, and at one time they widen to blazing pools. But light rays or jets, no, not correct, I don't think. Ixtal is described as being red, hence the title Discord and Scarlet. But even here, he appears to be more orange than red. He's supposed to have a smooth, metallic-looking body. I'll let you be the judge of that in this illustration here. And as long as I'm being so picky, Ixtal is described in the story as being deaf. He cannot hear. He can sense vibrations, but he cannot actually hear, so he probably shouldn't have ears in this illustration. I will say the crewmen in this illustration aren't bad. They look pretty good. I think Gilmore is not having to invent an alien creature here. He's used to drawing people, and so they look pretty good here. There's just one kind of error in this case, though, and that's the spacesuits are described as being completely transparent. Not just the helmets, but the suits themselves are of some kind of a transparent metallic substance. Transparent aluminum, maybe somehow, flexible. Anyway, so that's one small error there, aside from the just missing the mark completely, I think, on Ixtal. Now, to be fair to Gilmore, I think I should show some other examples of some of his work, just so that you know that he could be pretty good if he wasn't having to draw Ixtal. I am not able to find any biographical information on Gilmore at all, at least not under that name. And it could be that he was doing work for other publications or something outside of the science fiction genre or outside of the Street and Smith world of the magazines edited by Campbell. But of what I could find, it looks as though he was only active for 6 or 8 months, if that, in 1939, all under Campbell titles. And so I'll just put some examples here up on the screen just so you can kind of see, starting off with 3 illustrations that he did for 3 other stories, 2 from Astounding and 1 from Unknown. And as you look at those, I think you can tell that he was right up there with a lot of the other artists of the day. And I particularly like that second one there that has a very graphic feel to it. A little stylized, I kind of like that. And then we see the unfortunate cover of the issue we're talking about here. And then he did one other cover for Astounding that was really couldn't go too far wrong with that one. It's just some kind of a planetscape. But it is right in line with a lot of the other covers of its day. But don't worry, there were still 3 interior drawings that were done by a different artist, Paul Orban. And so let's take a look and see how he handled drawing Extol. Oh! Well, that's a shame. But this is the scene where Extol is captured at the beginning of the story, and the crew has caught him in the cage outside the ship, and they're going to draw him inside. Now, at this point, Extol has reached up his arm through the metal of the cage behind one of the crewmen and got a hold of his Atto gun, it's called, some kind of atomic blaster gun, the Atto gun, and was able to shoot one of the crew as they're out coming in from repairing the ship. However, unlike in this drawing here, the crew does not see him holding the gun. He's kind of cagey about it, and he only shoots one of the guys, and then he lets the pistol go, lets the Atto gun back out into space, floating next to the guy who he took it from, so that the crew then won't know that Extol shot them or shot him. Instead, it looks as though the crewman might have bumped the gun out of its holster and it went off by itself somehow. So Extol is... this introduces his intelligence, at least, in that he knows what he can do or has plans of how to combat the crew of the Beagle. But unfortunately, again, we get that goofy smile and the rays or jets coming out of his eyes. Just too cartoony and not at all like the description in the story. He actually looks playful and mischievous, and that is not Extol at all. But we do get this interesting 2-color printing here, which is very unusual. And I just wish that they had used the red to fill in the drawings of Extol rather than use it for the line art itself. This kind of makes it look like Extol is glowing red rather than just being red in color. But still, it's much more interesting than the standard black and white that we're so used to seeing all the time. So now on to the second drawing by Paul Orban here, and now we are inside the ship. And we see Extol passing through a wall into a corridor, and he is attacking his first crewman. This is the scene where I was talking about, where Extol reaches into the man's chest and gives him a heart attack. So he realizes he's got to be more careful here. And Extol, I think, this is a much better drawing now. Extol does not look as cartoony to me, a little more believable. We can see that he's got the forearms and the forelegs here, and how he can actually pass through a wall. That's interesting. And I think maybe you can see here a little bit better what I meant by, I wish they had just used the red color to color inside the black lines of Extol, because here I think you can really see what I mean by saying that just making him all red looks like he's glowing red and not just red in natural color. There's one mistake in this. Again, it's the spacesuit of the crewman. The whole suit should be transparent. However, this is on board the ship, so the crewman wouldn't even be wearing a spacesuit at all. He'd just be in his regular space uniform, I guess. But it's still a fun illustration, I think. And again, we get one more look at that spot red color, which is kind of nice. Now we'll look at the third and last drawing by Paul Orban. Now we are inside the engine room of the Beagle. And the engine room is, it's become the crew's safe space now, because the engine room, like the hull of the whole ship, the engine room itself is lined with that neutronium metal, which protects the engines and can contain the power of the ship's engineering section here. And it's described in the story as just this huge cavernous space within the ship, and the engines are so powerful that energy is forever crackling and dancing across the ceiling. And so that's what we're seeing there at the top of the illustration. If you haven't read the story and you look at this at first, it might look like you're inside a giant ice cavern maybe, but that's really supposed to be just energy, and that's okay. It's an interesting take, and I'm not sure at the time that this publication came out how many scenes we got to see of spaceship engine rooms. So I think it's a pretty cool scene for 1939. I think it would have been interesting to have gotten to see that spot red in the engine room as well. Maybe all the electricity, the energy along the ceiling there could have been handled in red somehow and make it look less like ice, perhaps, or other little details might have been in spot red. But speaking of the spot red, we probably have an advertiser to thank for that. And this is an ad that appeared on the first page of the interior of the magazine. It was for Union Leader cigarette and pipe tobacco that came in a very distinctive and branded red tin. And so a second color inside a magazine was pretty expensive in those days. And if an advertiser wanted a spring for a spot color to make their ad pop out from amongst all the other black and white ads in the magazine, they could pony up some extra money. And then any other page that fell on that same press signature could take advantage of that color since it was already on the blanket, and they could have that spot color on other pages for free, basically. The pages of a magazine wouldn't be printed page by page, really, but they would be printed 4 or maybe 8 up on a sheet, depending on the size of the press. And then when quartered and trimmed, the sheet is chopped or folded into different pages. And I thought it might be kind of fun to demonstrate how the two-color thing might work. So I made up this little mock-up. This is 4 up. The actual sheet might have been 8 up, perhaps, or it might have been web-fed if it's on one of those big roller presses like you'd see in all the old newspaper movies. But it would come off the press something like this, and then here's the ad that the advertisement sprung for the extra red color here, and that meant that anything on this side of the sheet had red ink on the blanket, so they could put red wherever they wanted on any other part of this size of the sheet. Then it would come off the press, and then they would send it to the bindery, and it would be folded, quartered like so, and then in half again. Like so. And then they would trim it or cut it. Like I got a handy little letter opener here, which they didn't use. They had equipment for this in the bindery. And then they would cut that like that, and then you wind up with 2 4-page signatures. It would be printed on both sides, like I said, but you wind up with 4 pages each. And so here, this becomes the inside first page of the magazine. And then there might be several other signatures put in here, one of them being the one with the first page of the story. So you'd open up your magazine, you'd see your nice, fancy, expensive ad here for the tobacco. Open it up at some point, you'd see the first page of the story, then some more pages perhaps until you finally get to the page here. There'd be more pages here with the illustration here. Now, by the time we get to the illustration of the engine room, that had to probably fall on a signature that did not have the red ink on the blanket. So we lost out on that one. But that's how something like that might have been put together, just so you can kind of have an idea of printing back in the day. Now, getting back to Paul Orban, I told a little bit more about his background in a video I did a while back on the debut of Isaac Asimov, and I'll leave a link to that down below if you want to hear a little more background of Paul Orban. But I just wanted to show a few more examples of his work, having only seen now his version of Extol, rather comical, unfortunately, that he could draw horrific creatures. And so here are 4 examples that I was able to find from about the same period. And you can take a gander at some of these here from 4 different stories, none of which I don't think come off as cartoony or silly in any way. And a couple of them are downright horrific. Well, here we are at the end of the video, and I realized that at some point earlier on, my rocket fizzled out, and so I had to refuel. And unfortunately, that kind of thing happens from time to time at this age, and we'll just leave it at that. But there you have it, folks. So let me know in the comments down below, please, if you are an A.E. Van Vogt fan, if you've read Discord in Scarlet. Do you prefer the short story version that we talked about tonight, or maybe the version in the novel, Voyage of the Space Beagle? Have you read Black Destroyer? Do you have another favorite Van Vogt story, perhaps? Anything related to the video, please feel free to leave a comment down below. It's fun to start conversations about this kind of thing. And I want to apologize if I rambled more than usual in this video here tonight. I'm a little out of practice. I have not done a BookTube video since the summer of Trek, a few months ago now already. And I do plan on getting back in the saddle and having more regular videos here with the new year. Speaking of which, have a happy new year. And thanks a lot for watching, and we'll chat again soon.